So my name is Sascha. I'm the CEO of Bunz. I know there's a lot of discussions around a couple of things I heard earlier and I wanted to address. One of the people in the room was asking about app stores and getting published with Apple. One of the things that people don't know is you're able to actually move your bits, which is BTZ, which is stands for Bunz Trading Zone. That's the currency that the community uses on the Bunz app. You're actually able to move bits from the application to Ethereum mainnet. So if you wanted to move it into a wallet, you could. We are in the Apple Store, which is super important to reaching mainstream distribution channels that everyone understands today, which is how we've gone about taking the approach of ensuring that we don't ignore distribution channels so that we can actually reach users and make an impact. Before I get into some of the stuff we're working on right now, I wanted to just kind of take an opportunity to share how we're doing things differently at Bunz and how we're trying to move the space forward from a very different perspective than a lot of the folks here who are probably very highly technical. We really abstract a lot of the difficult components around ownership. Ownership is actually a responsibility. And when you have a very small amount of value, it's actually a lot to ask of a user to take responsibility and ownership for that value. And so we actually take the opportunity to kind of bridge that by allowing users to interact with this currency bits on the application, and they can use it peer-to-peer, and they can actually use it at over 250 shops across Canada. We've got shops in Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, Montreal, and Hamilton. So you can use it all across Canada, and you can use it with each other and shops. And the interesting thing about it is when we first did this, like we started as a bartering economy. And so people were bartering things and trading things with each other. Oh, sorry, I lost my computer there. They're bartering and exchanging things with each other. And as you scale up, in 2017, we did about 1 million transactions completed strictly in barter. And as you scale up the network size in a bartering economy, the classical issues of barter actually begin to present themselves. So you have medium of exchange issues, you have value disparity issues. And so we actually had an opportunity by engineering a problem to create a solution to that problem and have demand for it. To give you some kind of quantify some of the impact this has had, every month about $200,000 is actually earned by users and spent at retail locations across Canada. Now, users didn't have the responsibility or didn't have to purchase the currency because we did that because we wanted to protect our community, and we wanted to create a new way for them to earn this digital asset and not have to take on the responsibility of the risk of that asset. So currently on the application, there's just shy of 300,000 people that use it. In the last 6 months that the currency's been launched, we've done over 1.7 or 1.8 million transactions. So it's pretty sizable. Now, when you look at, in kind of retrospect, if you look at 2017, we've doubled that in the first 6 months. So we're on track to probably, do 6x the transaction volumes in the course of 1 year difference with this new currency. So it's really had a dramatic impact. I think that the takeaway and the opportunity that I'm trying to share with you around the way we are approaching this is that if we exclude people from participating because of the technical barriers associated with what we're trying to achieve, we're not going to have the impact we want to have. And I think there's like an underlying tone that you can abstract to say, like, how do we make a difference and how do we restructure the system so that everyone benefits? And I think by abstracting some of these technologies and allowing them to interact in a centralized way on a centralized application, and then offering the ability for people to move to a decentralized infrastructure, that's probably the easier way to bring people into this new ecosystem. So I'll get to what we're working on. It's probably more interesting. So to kind of just before I get into it, the last thing I'll say is, as of today, right now, the application has a wallet associated with it, and people hold their currency in that wallet. The way they earn that currency is super important because they cannot purchase it. You cannot put dollars in. We're not exchange listed. You can't put dollars into into Bunz and buy bits. Every day there's a daily airdrop, and you can answer a question. So you give up some of your data, and we then are rewarding you. You have an option to do this or not, and you're rewarded in the currency. What that does is it gives an opportunity for businesses to buy access to you as a user, and then you have the choice of whether or not you accept that interaction, And we're just in the very early stages of monetization to do this. But the reason this is important is because what it does is it really flips the model of advertising on its head. And it says, okay, well, if it's your information and it's your value, then as you respond to me as a business, I'm going to make sure that you get the lion's share of the value. Because we're obviously a centralized application and we're still a company, there's about a 60-40 split between what the user gets and what the business gets. And our goal is ultimately to get down to zero. But this is maybe an easier step to take to begin to help people understand how this works. So this is the cool stuff we're doing. It's probably going to be more relevant to you guys, so I'm going to just jump into this. So Bunz, obviously, as an application right now, it's very transactional. It's a marketplace. There's over like 2.5 million items on there, a ton of transactions happening, a lot of activity. If you refresh on a daily, every 2 minutes, it's like just tons of new stuff. So we're building something called communities. Originally, Bunz was founded on Facebook. And it turned into well over, I think it's like just probably like 1.2 million people in the Facebook groups. And they all organize themselves into social groups. And there's administrators in those social groups. Now, the first problem you encounter when you're managing large-scale networks of people that are self-organizing is that the person who's actually doing the organized or administration of that group and maintaining the quality of that group and maintaining the membership of that group or promoting that group, they have zero compensation. They are not allowed to, bring in advertising onto that particular group, and no one's paying them. They're just doing it because they're doing it. Now that becomes a really difficult thing when the group becomes 200,000 people. There are groups in Toronto that they're called Bunz Home Zone or Bunz Trading Zone. They're really massive and there's a ton of work there. So the first question we asked ourselves is like, how do we create ways for our administrators or our community builders to earn or be incentivized to earn our currency so that they have an incentive to maintain the quality of the groups and encourage others to join those groups? So this is, kind of some of the early work here that we're doing. And you can see, like, you've requested to join this group. This group has a cost of 200 bits. So you've on a daily basis, you've earned bits, or maybe you've traded something for bits, or maybe you've invited some friends to the network and you've earned some bits. And now you want to join this group because you hear it's really awesome inside. The administrator is going to earn bits from you being a member, right? So that solves a problem that exists today, which is how are we rewarding people who are managers or growers of communities? Communities would live on the home screen of the app. You'll have obviously a lot of access, and there'll be a ton of different kinds of communities. You'll be able to create your own, and you'll be able to search them. So if you're looking for something in specific, if it doesn't exist, you can stake bits, and you can found that group, and I'll show you how that split will work. Or you can actually just go ahead and join one that you're interested in. So this group here in particular, maybe this is like Toronto Foodies, that's 500 bits to join. They'll have a different value to join each group. So you'll have the ability to, obviously, today, right now in production, you have the ability to have conversations with people one-to-one. You'll also have a topics category where you can actually see the different threads you're participating in different social groups. Okay. So there's two really key topics I want to cover. I want to jam through this so that you guys have lots of time to ask questions if you have any. So there's two concepts we're working on. One is involving quadratic voting, and the other one is involving radical liberalism. So first of all, actually, I should have asked this. Does anyone know what Bunz is or use Bunz? Or okay, cool, sweet guys, that's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so the commons is when you found a group. This is the common screen. This is the join screen for the group. You have a balance here of 5,232 bits. And that balance is collectively decided on how it's used. The community itself has earned that value from other brands and businesses, and the number of page views and that attention economics models, all those different models are actually contributing to the community's commons. And we use quadratic voting to decide as a community how that allocation gets distributed and what it gets used for. So here in the middle one here, we see that there are different things that people are voting on, and this particular one is live now. And this one's a Trinity Bellwoods revitalization project, and they can vote up and down. And for those of you who aren't fully, maybe too aware of what's going on, what it allows you to do is to raise the volume of the voices of people who are newer participants in the network, who don't have much bits. They can vote once and they still get to participate. And if someone really wants to fight the majority of the community in a vote, and they vote, heavily negatively against something when everyone else is voting positively, I have the ability to use my purchasing power or my bits to increase my power of my vote. But at the end of that vote, it gets redistributed to the people who participated. So the next vote, my ability to do that, continue to do that, my purchasing power that enables me to do that is dramatically reduced. And to quantify this, you can imagine I'm the CEO of this company. I have probably the largest allocation of bits in the network. I can only do it once with the existing community size. I can outvote the community once on one thing. And at that point, I would have distributed so many bits back to all the participants that I don't have the ability to swing a vote a second time. So that's how effective this is at the outset. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So, okay. So this is kind of an example of the create flow and kind of radical liberalism as it would be. Now, radical liberalism sounds like a political disposition. It's obviously, if anyone's read Glenn's work, and we've done some work with Glenn and discussed this with him, it really is actually more like a mathematical formula that you can apply to community governance. So here I've decided that my bits membership fee is going to be 500 bits, and it says if your membership fee is 500 bits, for every user you will make 50 bits, and you'll pay 50 bits to Bunz. The remaining 400 bits goes to the community commons, and your users decide how it's used. So here the Bunz administration would take, out of the staking costs of 10,000 bits to create this zone, Bunz would remove 5,000 bits of liability from the network, and then the commons would have a 5,000 bits deposit. So right out the outset, you now have a commons that's established with bits in it. Now, this is where it gets interesting, is in January 2019, it's your first earnings cycle. You've got 1,000 users and they've paid you 120,000 bits. But you have to pay 60,000 bits network fee to continue to host and earn as a community leader. So you can choose to pay, or you can say, no thanks, sell my community. If you pay, it goes back to the members of the community. So it goes back to the people who actually make that network and that community valuable. And if you don't pay, then it goes for sale. So all of a sudden it says, you're electing not to pay the network fee. This requires you to sell the community. Someone can now buy it at 180,000 bits. You can either list the community or you can go back and pay the tax. Do you guys understand? So it's offering incentive mechanisms across everything to make sure that the community stays healthy and that the people who actually make the network valuable are incented and rewarded. It's like Harburger's tax, right? Harburger tax. So what we really believe in at Bunz, and this is kind of why I'm doing the way we're doing this and what we're doing, is we believe in paying people, not platforms. A good example of how a business might interact with us in the future, in the coming months, I would expect that some of that stuff you'll see in market by February. So you'll have the ability to do this and earn using a social platform, and it'll beg the question, why are you using other platforms if you're able to be compensated and literally answer a question? Who's done a daily airdrop here? Has anyone? Okay, if you've done one, you can literally do maybe one or two, or in the early days you could do one, and you could go get a coffee and then go get a sandwich, and within minutes. It was quite straightforward. And it's obviously as the network scales, we have to kind of bring some of those reward sizes down. But the idea here is that businesses will be able to, out of the targeting surveys, the surveys and information that we've collected about these users, businesses will have the ability to kind of search through, not knowing who any of the users are, but they'll see one of the questions was what kind of dog do you own? Or sorry, what kind of animal do you own? It's cat, dog, reptile, other stuff. And they can say okay, this dog cohort is really, really relevant to my business. I want to interact with that community, but when I interact with that community, attention economics requires me to compensate them and ensure that their attention is rewarded for participation with my brand. And I think that's going to kind of change the dialogue around how we look at users' data. And I think someone was commenting on it earlier. And I think what we'll come to determine is that personal data is actually really mispriced as a result of us having no say in the equation. And I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of, again, abstract some of the difficulties and the barriers and obstacles that prevent users who are not highly technical, who don't have Trezors, who don't have ledgers, who don't understand any of this, to participate. And then as they mature in their understanding, allow them to move to fully decentralized infrastructure. So they can do that today. They can move bits from the centralized application. They go online on the Bunz.com, and they can go from there, their wallet. They can say, send to Ethereum mainnet. We even pay the gas to make sure it goes to their address. So I think that's an opportunity for us to look at usability and maybe reframe some of these objectives we have as a community who really want to kind of propel forward into a new space where we have an opportunity to change the way the world fundamentally works. And I think this is really what we're trying to achieve here. So I'll stop there. Any questions? Yeah.
I love the product, by the way. And
Thank you.
I want to use it more in my day-to-day life, but I find that I don't check my phone before I go to every store I go to or anything.
Cool.
Is there a way you guys are trying to bridge that I actually know this thing is coming?
Yes, yeah. So geofencing is a piece. So that's actually a great way for businesses to reuse bits on the network again. So it was almost like, consider it, the example here, let me just reiterate maybe, was how is it like, I don't always check my phone, it's a great product, but like how do I know when I can actually spend bits? One of the kind of modules, there's about 40 modules we've designed, and one of the modules that we're working on is the ability for a local retail business to be able to create a geofence to do two things. One, identify customers who on a regular basis may kind of navigate through their area. So it's an opportunity to reach out to them, invite them into their business if they choose to. And secondly is the ability to prompt users to say, hey, you can spend bits here if you wanted to. And that's definitely on the roadmap. I think we've got other pressing priorities that we're working through, but
Text would be great, like a notification.
yeah, for sure. Totally, feedback taken.
Yeah, or you could have sign, like,
There are signs on the glass. Yeah, there's actually a yellow teardrop that says bits accepted here. So there's about 110 stores in Toronto that accept bits. And some stores are now doing 30 to 40% of the total monthly transactions actually in our currency, which is amazing. Yeah. Yes.
How did you come up with the incentive mechanism? Like, did you have to do some kind of research to really understand these communities? Like, how scalable is this in production? Like, with so many different people, how can you like test that this would actually work?
So I get the bet. It's a totally great question. We've been at this for 2.5 years. I've studied Bunz from the point where it was 5,000 people in one Facebook group to over 1 million people in like 300 different cities around the world, right? So I've had that benefit of seeing how it evolves and paying very close attention. Obviously, there's an element of it that I don't necessarily have control over or any understanding of how it will play out or any even hypothesis as to what will happen. But what I can say is that the beauty in this particular, and this is why we did it the way we did it, we didn't allow users to purchase these tokens, is because the loss associated with taking dollars and allocating it to a system and then that system failing you, we've seen that happen and that hurts really bad. And when there's over 200,000 people in your city that use the application on on a daily basis, to give you some context, like I saw the numbers earlier and like our daily active user base is over 30,000 people. So like, it's like the impact when you have dollars on the line, it can be tremendous to people. And we had a really firm rule when we did this, which is like, we're going to take all the hard risks and we're going to pull them out so that the users don't have to kind of, suffer if we make a mistake or if we're wrong. And that's why we took the approach of ensuring that the value is backed by businesses who want to reach those users and their data rather than their dollars. It allows us a little bit more leeway to fail, but do it boldly, trying to make real change. Did that answer your question? Thank you. Yes.
so you could withdraw tokens from the app and onto the token, ERC.
Yeah, it's an ERC 223. Yeah.
So, okay. I was going to ask how you could prevent decentralized exchanges from trading.
You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You can go, yeah, if I mean, for the technical folks, if you want to go do what you want, right? I don't know, and this is why often people are like, so what's the value of a bit? And I was like, well, usually 1 bit is equivalent to a 1 cent Canadian in redeemable value at a business. That's kind of how the contracts are structured with each one of the businesses that participate in the network. But there's nothing preventing you from having a market rate that is independent or a secondary market with higher volatility in that rate. Our approach would be to either synchronize the market rate or stabilize the currency with a 2 or 3 token system as well. Yes, question in the back.
When you transfer bits in the app, is that a native transaction that's committed to the blockchain, or do you have sort of like a centralized layer?
A centralized layer, yeah. And we actually worked with ChainSafe a bit on some pieces of technology that allow us to maintain and prevent double spend between the centralized application and the decentralized infrastructures. But yeah, it is centralized layer.
You work as a sort of
Yeah, we pay the gas, not the customer. The customer doesn't even know what Ethereum is most of the time, right? So yeah, but for the folks who want to be able to have ownership of their data value, we facilitate that. And you just complete a form and submit it, and then I think it's like a 48-hour processing period, and then the bits are deposited to your Ethereum address or MyEther wallet.
So what guarantees offer your data that you get access and something happens?
I wish my CTO was here to address that for you, but I couldn't speak to it myself, really. But I could say that the existing wallet balances are backed up to an L2 chain. I think that's how he structured it. So there's actually a redundancy between the infrastructure, but it is like a centralized infrastructure as well. So there's some risk in that for sure. Yeah, sure.
What happens when you sell a community? What happens to the community?
The administrative ownership of that community would get transitioned to the new purchaser of that community, and then the earning potential of that community is now transferred to the new owner. So if there are, next month, if you're going to earn 120,000 bits again, and you bought it from me in a forced sale, you paid the tax, you paid the amount, I got paid out as a user, as the original admin, I got paid out, you paid the tax, and now you own it. And then next month, if the community stays the exact same size, you have an opportunity to sell it the same way I did, or you can pay the tax to the community. So you pay the 60,000 bits. Portion of it goes to almost like a hierarchy. Some of it goes to Bunz, some of it goes to the zones, some of it goes to the users. Yes.
Previously, you just mentioned multiple token architecture. Could you go more in depth about what the other tokens or the benefits?
Sure.
Based on what you said?
Sure. Yeah. So okay. So the question there was, can you talk about like multiple token architectures if you're going to try and stabilize a currency rather than just pegging it and having a treasury to back the currency? Really, the two alternatives, the way I see it, is you either have a highly volatile currency that's fluctuating in value, and you synchronize the purchasing power of the application to that volatility, or alternatively, you stabilize the currency. So to stabilize the currency, we look at things like basis, so there's a 3-token structure. You've got a share token, so we have an overprinting event that when it moves too far off the peg, you print to the share tokens. When you have when you're moving below the peg, you offer bonds with an incentive for people to buy those bonds with the tokens to take tokens out of circulation. The one big thing I would say is a necessary fourth component is again a commons. So I think that like the reason you print to share tokens and not to the actual users is because they don't want to create a psychological effect of devaluation of the currency. All of a sudden, if all of us in the room are just getting Ether because it had an overprinting circumstance, or not Ether, but like a stable coin of some sort, if we all of a sudden just got more of that same token, it would actually create a perceived devaluation in that currency. So, but what you can do is you can print to a common. So you'd actually have, instead of just printing to a share token, you'd actually could print to another community pool that has some sort of common benefit. And I think the purpose in that, in our minds, would be to create a way for people to kind of fundamentally come together and make decisions as a community around how dollars should be used or value should be used. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, in the back.
When you transfer your bits to an Ethereum chain, can you actually spend them directly with business, or do you have to transfer them back to the platform?
Yeah, you have to move them back into the network or onto the application to be able to spend them with the businesses. So the way it works is you can just open your wallet on your Bunz app, and then you just the merchants. Some of the merchants actually have merchant terminals, like an actual application specifically for them, and some of them just have QR codes with open wallets. You scan their QR and you process the transaction. You enter your PIN to be able to move the value from your wallet to the merchant's wallet, and then the merchant, if they have an app, it goes like cha-ching, and if they don't have an app, then you just show them, and then they give you the coffee, and you walk out. Yeah. Yes. How do we determine the value of each item? Users determine the value. So when you're scrolling through the home feed, if there's like a lot of items that are all kinds of different values, like something might be 5,000 bits, but if you sell it because you don't care about it, you might post it for 50 bits. So that's, the users decide really how that's kind of navigated. But the businesses have a standing redemption agreement with us, depending on their the redemption model, they have the ability to redeem back against Treasury with us. So the businesses have a stable exit, whereas the users peer-to-peer do not. Any other questions? Yeah.
Was the company founded with the idea of going decentralized, or was this a new?
A good question. I think like the underlying tones at the time were definitely there, but it wasn't like we're going to build a decentralized, we're going to build a cryptocurrency. I think like we only really had two promises we made when Emily and I decided to do this. Emily was the original founder of the Facebook group, and I still work with Emily, which is really cool. The two promises we made to each other were that the community would always come first, and that there would be no cash in the zone. And so we honored both of those in doing what we've done.
Is there a game plan to move to decentralization?
Oh, 100%, yeah. Yeah.
Was that incorporated into the code?
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's on a roadmap. I think like you have to build, the way we see it, and maybe it's very different from the way maybe others in the room perceive it, is we want to build this infrastructure to demand. And our opportunity is to be able to simplify the experience and create something that everyone can interact with that isn't exclusionary, and then migrate that piece by piece based on a number of kind of ranking of importance over to a fully decentralized infrastructure.
It's an interesting way you put it. Kind of the reverse way in which everyone's thinking to go.
Yeah.
So focus on decentralization.
Yes.
Freedom, etc. Kind of going
The entire opposite. Yeah, people say we're backwards sometimes. I think it's a badge of honor at this point. I mean, the good news is that there's, again, there's nearly 300,000 people that use this application. We've done 1.7 million transactions in our currency.
I'm just not sure what's the difference between
Yep.
a company like you and
Sure.
every other normal company out there as opposed to one focused on blockchain and decentralization. Do you have some kind of game, like are you going to go on Substrate and say, hey, Substrate makes a blockchain and let's start from there? Is there any kind of game plan?
Yes, yeah. So, okay, so I think the immediate plan is to continue to maintain the stability of the currency through the monetization of the ability for businesses to purchase the currency further and interact with customers. So that stabilizes your currency. The next step is to move the wallets on chain and the transaction layers on chain. And I don't know whether or not we'll ever get to a point where like DApps are the thing, and that there's a distribution channel that's significant enough to make it worth scaling to that channel. But the critical components to the infrastructure, like around transactions, wallet balances, we do intend on moving that on chain. I can't say when that'll happen at this time. I think like for us, it's more a matter of making sure that the value that's being driven to users is sustainable. And then once that sustainability is in place, then we'll have the luxury and opportunity to kind of further decentralize the infrastructure. So you have the opportunity right now. Like we don't need to necessarily build a blockchain right off the bat. If you have the ability to send your bits to Ethereum mainnet, you can have them there.
It's smart because if you did run your company that way, you wouldn't have users.
Correct. Yeah, there's no debating that, and that's why I think that's why we took the approach. It was a very unpopular approach about a year ago. I think I have a couple. For those of you who've been following us or know kind of what's been said, about a year ago it would have been said that, like, this is not a decentralized project. And like, sure, if you want to call it that, don't call it that. But the truth is that the impact that people are feeling from the project is of the same vein of the work that you're doing. And for us, we're just taking a different approach to make sure that we realize the benefits and learn from the data and are driven by actual real world use rather than starting from an infrastructure and not knowing whether or not anyone's ever going to use it.
It could be very attractive to this sector if you had a set game plan on how you're going to do that exactly.
Yeah, we do have that.
Because I haven't seen anyone be able to put that right.
We do have that, yeah. Yeah, we do have a roadmap of our infrastructure cutting over from centralized to decentralized infrastructure. I think we were even the first to create a bridge between sending like from a centralized application to Ethereum mainnet. Like no one ever did that. These guys worked with us very carefully to make sure that worked correctly. But yeah, I think there is a lot of new ground here, and we're just offering a very different narrative and approach on how to do that. But yeah, I appreciate your feedback. Yeah.
Appreciate it a lot. I think it's quite imperative for the ecosystem to have this type of experimentation and kind of look at how we can make decentralization a bit more palatable for people to embrace.